Hello YouTubers, this is Gold Standard 00924 coming at you with another video. I'm going to be redoing my Mighty Morphin Power Rangers reviews. I did mention this in my vlog a month back that I was taking under consideration that I may redo my Power Ranger reviews, specifically the original Power Ranger series. And looking back at some of these videos, I was just very nervous. I just didn't really hit the point on. I just really felt that I could have done so much better. And like when I did these videos, I was still very new to making videos. I just haven't really got that. Just didn't really catch on with some of the viewers. And since now that I've kind of had some experience making videos on YouTube, the past 3 years, um, I just kind of figured, just kind of go back to memory lane and kind of redo my videos. So, and this is going to be what the video is. I'm not sure how long it's going to be since Mighty Morphin is really one of the longest Power Ranger series in the entire franchise's history. And with a total number of like 155 episodes. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of storylines that I'd probably be discussing, like story arcs, characters, stuff like that. So I'm not sure how long this is going to be, but until my voice starts to get really dry or I just get to the point where I just can't really elaborate as much, then I'm just probably going to cut it off and maybe continue doing this installment in the next part. So just be alert on that. So preface aside, let's just get started. Power Rangers, as we all know, it's one of the cult classic hits. The biggest phenomenon in the 1990s. It sold a ton of merchandise. Ranging from pillows to action figures and so forth. VHS tapes as well. So I mean, Power Rangers has kind of really set the standard for a lot of live action shows, especially as far as like action adventure. This show came out at a time when martial arts was like the biggest thing. If you think about it, back around the early '90s, you had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you had Street Fighter, Double Dragon, Mortal Kombat. A lot of these franchises that kind of emphasized on hand-to-hand combat. And with Power Rangers, it was one of those other shows that was kind of milking in on the success of martial arts. Um, so I mean, it came out at the right time, and Power Rangers did also kind of drew influences from the success of Saved by the Bell, which was one of the first, if not the first, live action program on Saturday mornings. Because for most of existence since the 60s, Saturday mornings has been reserved for cartoons. And then Saved by the Bell came and pretty much changed the landscape of Saturday mornings. And then it wasn't until several years later that Power Rangers would be another live action program on Saturday mornings that, unlike Saved by the Bell, it kind of drew into more action and adventure as opposed to this sitcom format. And on top of that, Power Rangers did center around teenagers, much like Saved by the Bell did. So it did came out around the right time. So I mean, this show during its earlier years really hit its stride. Um, so I mean, it really was this big classic hit. Um, Now, obviously, Power Rangers is still going on this day. And, it had one hiatus in 2010, and that was the year when Saban outbid Disney and repurchased the rights to the Power Ranger franchise again. And now you see it on Nickelodeon, and it's still showing reruns and new episodes on there. So Power Rangers, I mean, it's still going strong. I mean, it's not as big as it was in the '90s, but with the merchandise sales still selling well, Power Rangers is still still running, still run the engines. Um, so yeah, I mean, despite the critics and all that stuff. Um, so Power Rangers was taken from Super Sentai, which is a popular tokusatsu show in Japan. It came out in 1975. Tokusatsu is a term for special effects, where a lot of live action programming emphasizes on a superhero, like an ordinary civilian dressed as a superhero, or some kind of spandex costume or metallic costume whatsoever, and they saved the day and stuff. But Sentai was the biggest thing in Japan in the 70s, and Power Rangers takes its footage from Zoo Ranger, which is basically a dinosaur themed Sentai series that came out about in 1992, about a year short before Mighty Morphin Power Rangers came out, and so it really took some of the footage from Sentai, and they utilize like fight scenes and Megazord fights, where you see like this big gigantic Megazord or like this giant robot fighting against this big giant monster that grows in size. Yeah, sort of like Godzilla in a way. So I mean, without Super Sentai, Power Rangers probably would not have existed. Now, granted, Power Rangers is really more of its own entity, and Sentai has its own storylines as well, and the difference between Power Rangers and Sentai is that Sentai is kind of really more, it's a little more edgier compared to Power Rangers. Some like you'll have like certain Power Rangers actually getting hurt really bad, or there was like a character that dies. But whereas in Power Rangers, it's more toned down, it's more kid friendly. It's pretty campy and not really as story arc driven compared to Sentai. Now, you could argue in recent years, Power Rangers is really a little more story driven compared to the original series with its formulaic standalone episodes. But there are some differences between Rangers and Sentai. Different characters, different actors portraying certain characters, and sometimes different stories. So I mean, Power Rangers and Sentai, I mean, they may share their traits, but at the end of the day, they're entirely different series. So that's basically the Power Rangers franchise in general. So I mean, now that we're getting into Mighty Morphin, the first ever Power Ranger series to hit in the United States as well as many other countries. Mighty Morphin starts off with these group of teenagers, 5 of them, and they're recruited by an ancient sorcerer by the name of Zordon. He summons those 5 to become the so-called Power Rangers, just a group of civilians that are dressed in these Ranger spandex suits, with different multicolored schemes that they're chosen in. You have Jason, who's like the leader, the Red Ranger, with the power of the Tyrannosaurus. You have Zach, who's the Black Ranger, with the power of the Mastodon. You have Billy, the Blue Ranger, the Triceratops. Trini, the Yellow Ranger, with the saber-toothed tiger, and Kimberly, the Pink Ranger with the pterodactyl. And those 5, they become these superheroes, saving their city of Angel Grove, from the forces of evil. So, and then you also have the antagonists, like the evil, like the villains of the group. You have the Rita Repulsa, the main villain of the series, and along with her minions, Finster, Goldar, Bamboo, and Squat. And they were sealed in this dumpster about 10,000 years ago during a war between Zordon and the Morphin Masters. And then Rita trapped Zordon in this tube, and where he's pretty much stuck there for eternity. And then the Morphin Masters pretty much sacrificed themselves, and they sealed Rita and her minions inside this dumpster for millennia to come. And they were staying there until the first episode, which is Day of the Dumpster. And the episode opens up with these two astronauts that are on the moon, and they stumble upon this dumpster, and they aren't really sure what's doing on there. And then they open the lid, and the biggest mistake, and that was their biggest mistake, when Rita and their minions finally come out of this dumpster. They come out of exile, and now they're coming back and to conquer Earth. And so they pretty much built their own palace, and Rita has her repulsive scope to kind of keep an eye out on the Power Rangers, whatever they're doing. And then you get to see these 5 teenagers. We get to learn just basic personalities. Jason's like a martial artist. Billy's more like the genius, the prodigy of the group. Trini, another accomplished martial artist. Zach, the I'm looking for that term. He does breakdown dances, and Kimberly, is an aspiring gymnast. So I mean, they both have some sort of hobby that they enjoy and what they kind of strive for doing and what they do best. And there's like this earthquake going in, and they both get transported to this command center where they meet up with Zordon and another robot named Alpha 5. And Zordon chooses those 5 teenagers with attitude to become the Power Rangers. So eventually they also get introduced with their Megazords later on, and they also get to and they use those Megazords to kind of counteract against the whatever monster that they're fighting, and whenever Rita grows them in the size. So we all know like Rita's infamous quote, like whenever she says, it's like, "Make my monster grow," and so she just throws out this object, and then or at least her staff, and it causes the monster to kind of grow into like this Godzilla-size creature, and that's where the Megazord comes into play. And eventually the Power Rangers succeed in their first battle, and then basically that's really how the pilot episode goes. At first there was a little uncertainty from Zach. He didn't believe in anything, but eventually it turns out that he was wrong, and that this threat was actually real. So I mean, eventually the Rangers kind of started getting used to being used to doing their job, and just fighting crime and saving the day. Just the traditional superhero formula. So I mean, that's really Day of the Dumpster in a nutshell. I mean, it was still a pretty good episode. Just a very simple, straightforward episode, and a good way to kind of introduce us to the series. Now, there was originally like 2 unaired pilot episodes, with another unaired pilot episode being like it was only aired once on Fox Kids back in the late 90s. And there was a lot of differences between the actual pilot we saw, as well as the unaired pilot that was only aired once on television. In the unaired pilot, you see the teenagers, just hanging out in this bowling alley, and we see Bulk and Skull being like hanging out with a group of gang members, or at least Skull. But eventually, it's somewhat identical to the final product, but it's pretty much different, not just in the sense of setting, but also in the fact that the command center, the interior design was really different from what we see in the actual show. And Zordon is actually called Zoltar, Zoltar as it's spelled. And also on top of that, there was a different actress that played Trini. In the actual series, Twee Trang, was the Yellow Ranger, but in the unaired pilot, it was portrayed by Audrey DuBois, and there was different actress portraying a certain character, and even the morphing sequence was different because they actually used the morphing sequence from the Zoo Ranger, where like the four Rangers are actually holding their Dino coins in a different way, or at least very similar to the Zoo Ranger one, where they're just simply holding their Dino Morphers by one hand. They still call it by their dinosaur names, but just the morphing sequence was very different from the iconic morph sequence that we all know. And there is one of those examples of the differences between the unaired pilot and the pilot that we got to see. So there you have it. So overall, Day of the Dumpster, very solid episode. Very simple. Just a very compelling way to kind of get us introduced to what the series is about and what these characters are, how they can relate to us, or just who are these people and why are they doing what they're doing best. That's really Day of the Dumpster. And then you see a couple of standalone episodes, and and the biggest breakout episode was the Green with Evil 5-part miniseries. In that miniseries, we get to the introduction of Tommy, the Green Power Ranger. He and Jason were competing in this martial arts competition, which ended in a draw. And then, Tommy was kidnapped by Rita, and, Rita takes Tommy under her wing as the new Green Power Ranger with the dragon coin that Rita Repulsa had. And, Tommy was under the spell, and, he was kicking all the Power Rangers' ass, and just pretty much the dominant figure for a majority of this miniseries. He actually hijacked the command center and pretty much destroyed nearly the entire control panels, and even shut down Zordon so that the Rangers can't really interact with him. They couldn't get any advice on how to defeat the main villain that they were fighting. And and it also spanned into these subtitles, with Jason's battle, where Jason was sent to this dark dimension by Goldar, and he had to fight Goldar unmorphed when his power morpher when he loses power morpher, and he had to fight him unmorphed. And you have the third episode where Scorpina is introduced, as one of Rita's minions. And then you had an episode where the Megazords were sunk in the depths of the earth and they couldn't really access their Megazords. And then the fifth episode all culminates down to the episode where the spell that Tommy was in, it gets depleted when Jason defeats Tommy in a battle. And this also kind of introduces the Dragon Zord, that was controlled by the Green Ranger, with the use of the Dragon Dagger. And then eventually at the end of the episode, Tommy agrees to work with the Power Rangers, and now now Tommy is part of the team, despite his actions, but he's trying to redeem himself. He just kind of feels regretful at first, but then he soon thinks about it, and then eventually Tommy joins the team. So that's really Green with Evil. Just a very iconic episode. It was one of the most influential episodes of Power Rangers, since it was really, really made it a lot more notable and just really like the most breakthrough story arc in Power Rangers history. And just seeing like this Sixth Ranger being this somewhat unique attraction that's very mysterious, that's really a lot, just more powerful than the regular Rangers. Just has its own identity. So I mean, it just really was that influential. And also, Tommy and Kimberly. Kimberly, starts to have a crush on Tommy, and it kind of really starts the seeds of Kimberly and Tommy's relationship as it builds later in the first season. So I mean, so it's kind of set the standard for a lot of the Power Ranger episodes that came on after Green with Evil. So I mean, Green with Evil is also the only time that Power Rangers ever had a 5-parter. I mean, there have been a lot of other multi-parters throughout the history of Power Rangers, but most of them only lasted like 4 episodes, or they'll last like under these certain story, these story arcs, but they don't have like a multi-part episode officially, like part 1, part 2. Like they'll say like just like this certain standalone episode followed by this other standalone episode, but it's not really listed as parts. So I think that's kind of what I'm trying to clarify. But yeah, other than that, Korean with Evil is pretty much the only 5-parter episode of Power Rangers in its entire 20-year history. Just a little interesting trivia there. So eventually, Tommy joins the team. Just a lot of other story arc, just a lot of standalone episodes here and there. And you also have like one episode where Gung Ho, where Tommy and Jason were not getting along, and then Zordon had to send Tommy and Jason on this mission to find the accessories that were needed to access Titanus, this big gigantic catapult Megazord, I guess you want to call it that. And it kind of strengthens the Dino Megazord, which were the Megazords of this season, and just to make it even more powerful. And also in that episode, it's one of the really few instances where Tommy hands his dragon shield over to another Ranger, and the dragon shield was kind of like this gold plate around the Green Ranger's chest. And then this is one of the few instances where Tommy just exchanges Jason's power sword, and then Jason would actually use the dragon shield that Tommy lent to him. And this would happen again in a few episodes also. So I mean, it's one of those instances where you get to see the Green Ranger really standing out from a lot of the other Power Rangers. Just by the fact that it just has its own, like, its special ability. The Dragon Shield being like this most, just really kind of strengthening the Green Ranger's powers. So I mean, Gung Ho, just a really good episode, despite being like just a standalone episode. What else he had? And you also have Island of Illusion, the 2-part series where all the 6 Power Rangers were sent to this island that Rita Repulsa sent them to. And they have to overcome their fears, or otherwise they'll become invisible for good. And it's kind of like a semi-clip show in a way, but they kind of meshed it up in a really good way where it's like oh my gosh, the Rangers are gonna disappear, like what's gonna happen. So it's more than just the generic clip show that a lot of TV shows have done, and even Power Rangers in its later seasons kind of do that too. But this semi clip show kind of, for a 2-parter, just really try to kind of make it in its own twist, if you want to put it that. So I mean, that was a pretty cool episode. The Green Candle, another two-parter. This is where it's revealed that the Green Ranger powers are actually temporary because there's like the Green Candle, which was basically the main power source of the Green Ranger. And once the candle withers away, the Green Ranger's powers cannot be used, or it'll just be depleted for good. And so like Jason had to go to this Rita's Dark Dimension again, and he had to kind of retrieve the Green Candle and prevent it from being depleted. But at the end of the two-parter, Jason couldn't. They failed to retrieve the Green Candle, and then they had to like save Tommy, since he was like the only guy in a Dragon Zord that was fighting, and he was getting his ass beat, and now the Power Rangers had to come to the rescue, come to his aid for him. And so eventually, the Green Ranger, hands over his Dragon Coin over to Jason. And unlike the previous time where he only had to hand out his Dragon Shield, he pretty much lends out his Dragon Coin like its whole power for good. Or at least as we thought at the time. So he hands it. So Tommy hands out Jason his Dragon Coin, and thus Tommy is back to being his normal self, and he can't morph into the Green Ranger anymore now that he's lent Jason his powers. So I mean, it was kind of weird at the time. I mean, in the Super Sentai version, Tommy's Sentai counterpart Burai actually died during a battle, and Fox couldn't allow death to occur in any of their TV shows, especially children's programming. So that was pretty much scrapped, and then Tommy had to, like, instead of actually dying, he had to lend his powers to Jason just to kind of keep it safe from evil's hands. So I mean, Tommy, just kind of disappears from Ranger duty. Eventually, Tommy and Kimberly eventually have their first kiss, and Tommy and Kimberly go to the dance. Kimberly accepts. So I mean, it all ends well in the end. So I mean, yeah, Tommy lost his powers, but he gained something in return, and that was his relationship with Kimberly. Excuse me. So that's really how the Green Candle two-parter ends. So there you have it. That. And then you got the two-parter episode Doomsday, where there's Power Rangers Day, and the Angel Grove is kind of holding this celebration party at a park, and then Rita pretty much kidnaps the Angel Grove civilians, and they all disappear. And the Power Rangers have to have what could have been their one last battle against Rita's and her goons. And this is where they fight against Lokar and Goldar in this two-part miniseries. Originally, Doomsday was going to be the final episode of Power Rangers ever. And because they originally ordered 40 episodes, Power Rangers by this point was really becoming this global phenomenon. And Saban, the company that funded Power Rangers, they kind of requested Toei to kind of order 20 more episodes, and as a result of the Power Rangers phenomenon. And they kind of altered the ending where Rita was supposed to get sealed in the dumpster once again by the Rangers, but that was altered. So basically, Rita was never sent to the dumpster. She was still sticking around along with their minions. And there was like the end scene of part two where Zordon asked whether or not the Rangers would give up their duties as Power Rangers, but then they all agreed that they were gonna stay as Power Rangers. So I mean, there was some little hint that you could tell that this could have been the final episode, or it would have been the final episode of Power Rangers, but with the ratings skyrocketing, Power Rangers continued on for an extra 20 episodes under Zoo 2, which was the extended version of Zoo Ranger, the counter, the Super Sentai counterpart to the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers series. So there you have that. And then we get to a couple episodes, the final multi-parter of season 1. You have Return of an Old Friend. The Power Rangers bring in their parents. It's kind of like a parents' reunion day. But then Rita kidnaps their parents, and the Power Rangers also in that episode had to not sacrifice, but to kind of give away their powers to Goldar, unless they agreed that their parents would come back. And it wasn't until towards the end of part 1 where Tommy actually showed up once again. So I mean, it kind of took a while for them to kind of bring back Tommy, but he brings back in part 2, and eventually he morphs into the Green Power Ranger once again, but this time with the green candle out of the way. Zordon had to transfer his powers to Tommy in his Dragon Coin in order for him to morph into the Green Ranger again. So the Green Ranger, is still temporary. Has a very temporary amount of time to morph. So I mean, it doesn't really last very long. It has very limited supply. So despite that, the Green Ranger Tommy, he retrieves the Dino Coins and returns it to the Power Rangers. Jason, Trini, Zach, Kimberly, Billy regain their Power Coins once again. And, basically at the end, the parents come back, and, just all is good with the world at the end, as usual. So that's basically Return of an Old Friend. But it kind of really contrives itself in a way, because if Zordon was able to transfer his powers to Tommy's Dragon Coin, then couldn't they have used it episodes prior when Doomsday came along? Because it was a two-parter. Tommy had a little cameo in part 2, but you would think that in desperate situations where the Power Rangers were getting their asses whipped, you would think that maybe Tommy could have asked Zordon if they could have probably lent his powers out or something. But they didn't wait till 10 episodes later. But I guess they didn't really know at the time, or the fact that Power Rangers was still relying more heavily on Sentai footage, so it was kind of really out of their control. Or they just didn't have enough budget to kind of film their original footage. But I don't know. I mean, they could have just had Zordon lend out his transfer some of his energy to Tommy, but that didn't happen until many episodes after Doomsday. So that still remains a mystery. Return of an Old Friend, the last two-parter of season 1. And you basically had a couple standalone episodes after that, and the season 1 finale was basically an oyster stew where Zach and Angela were on a date, and everyone was turned to stone except for Zach and Tommy. And so eventually, Zach borrows Tommy's Dragon Shield, and this was pretty much the only time he was using the Dragon Shield. Um, and eventually after that, Zach, Angela and the others were back to normal, and Zach and Angela finally, they finally kiss. After all those episodes of Angela turning Zach down. So that's basically Power Rangers season one. So I mean, yeah, so season one ended pretty much as a normal episode. I mean, not as like a epic closer like what could have been Doomsday, which was the original finale, but the popularity of the show expanded 20 more episodes. Um, so I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could have been a lot better for the finale, but it just felt very disappointing for as a finale. But I mean, it was still a solid episode regardless. But I don't know. But for a finale, it's very disappointing. Um, I don't know. I mean, Power Rangers season one, um, just I mean, the earlier seasons, I mean, they weren't really catching on. Just a lot of these formulaic, repetitive episodes that weren't very story driven outside the multi-parters. But I mean, it did kind of hold the test of time. It did revolutionize Power Rangers. Yeah, the jokes are very cheesy and just a lot of one-liners and a lot of stereotypical characters. Um, Now, speaking of characters, I was hoping I was gonna dive into detail with them, but you have Zach, the Black Ranger. I already discussed about his relationship with Angela and how he had a crush on her, but he always kept turning him down. Zach, was a pretty cool character. Just a well-talented dancer. Kind of like the comic relief of the group. Um, he was just really cool. Just someone you could hang out with. Someone you can't get mad at, but just someone that kind of cheers you up, even if you're in a bad mood. So I mean, Zach was a pretty cool ranger. He doesn't get talked about because of his replacement. When we get to season two, but Zach for what he was, he was very unique in his own way. Um, but he just really defined cool at the time. He just had that. I don't know how you describe it, but just the comic relief that you just want to hang out with. Just kind of sum it up. You also have Billy, the Blue Ranger. He serves as kind of like the tech of the group. He's kind of looked at as kind of like the nerd. Just someone that's this prodigy that could work well with machines and any computer work and stuff. So he's kind of like more of the tech person of the group. He even built those communicator watches so that all the Rangers can interact with each other in case of an emergency. So Billy was actually pretty useful. In the beginning, he was kind of like the underdog. He just wasn't really much of a fighter. Um, but as the series progressed, we get to see Billy kind of evolve over time and more confident in himself, and you could really see him do some successful hand-to-hand combat. Um, I mean, he was a pretty cool character. Um, just like the tech of the group, and he was still pretty cool. And you also have Trini, the Yellow Ranger. She and Billy were pretty close. She's kind of like just a very soft-spoken martial artist, and just it's really a shame that her actress passed away. Rest in peace, Tree Trang. But she was actually just a really really laid back Power Ranger. Just she's kind of like the environmentalist chick. There's kind of persuading people to kind of encourage them to kind of make a difference with their community and do the right thing and stuff. So I mean she was pretty laid back. I mean, there weren't really a lot of episodes devoted towards her, so I mean, a lot of her episodes tend to get overlooked or just forgotten because maybe certain characters were popular than her, or she just didn't have a lot of episodes focused towards her. She had an episode where she was afraid of heights, and a couple of episodes where she had to save her cousin from a clown when the Rangers went to this carnival. And there was like another episode where she had to practice the praying mantis martial arts move, or at least style, excuse me, martial arts style. And Probably one of my favorite episodes has to be from the second season, from Welcome to Venus Island. Just a pretty touching moment, with her and Tommy, just having a little pep talk. But just I don't know. A lot of episodes tend to get very forgotten, but there are some episodes I really liked. So I mean, Trini was a pretty underrated Yellow Ranger, in my opinion. But just pretty cool. Then you have Kimberly, the Pink Power Ranger. Um, what more can I say? I mean, yeah, she was fine as hell. Amy Jo Johnson, just every almost every guy's crush in the '90s. I mean, she's still sort of fit now. I mean, even in her 40s. I mean, she's still a hot mom. I mean, I won't lie. She still looks very fit. But even back then, she was just fit then. She's an accomplished gymnast. She's like the heart of the group. So I mean, I really like. She was of course very hot, obviously, but just just a really very sweet, charming Power Ranger. Um, she was also known for a couple catchphrases, like "catch you on the flip side," and stuff like that. Um, but I mean, I really like Amy Jo Johnson. Just her acting ability. Especially when one of the most successful actors or actresses to come out of this show. So I mean, she's had some pretty decent career. Um, but just a very talented actress. A very good musician. But with Kimberly, getting back to her Kimberly character, she was just just the it's a stereotypical girly girl. But we get to see her in these story arcs, and especially when she and Tommy hook up. So I mean, she was one of the very popular Power Rangers that a lot of females, a lot of girls idolized growing up. So I mean, she was a pretty good role model for those girls, and just a very sympathetic Power Ranger. Um, I mean, in real life, obviously, Amy Jo is actually a gymnast, just like Kimberly. And I think another gymnast was David Yost, who played Billy. Where I think in another interview he did, he mentioned that he actually was trained as a gymnast. So I mean, that was actually kind of interesting. But it's just I don't know. Kimberly, just another very popular Power Ranger. Um, so that's basically Kimberly in a nutshell. Um, and then you have Jason, the leader of the pack, the Red Ranger. I mean, he's kind of like the muscle of the group. He's just very determined. He never backs down from a fight. But he just has that really big ambition. And especially his defining moment would be in the Green with Evil five-parter where all the Rangers were almost looking like they're losing hope and they were wanting to give up, but Jason encouraged them not to, and just really just encouraging the Rangers to not give up and just fight the good fight. So I mean, Jason, he was a very influential Power Ranger. I mean, he doesn't really get a lot of credit as much, because Tommy came along and was this biggest, this big character sensation of the group, this breakout character, and a lot of people just kind of forgot about what Jason had to provide to the table. But Jason was unique for what he was. So there you have it. That. And speaking of Tommy, he comes along midway through season one. The Green Ranger. He was controlled by Rita. But Tommy, was a pretty cool Ranger for the time. He was supposed to be a temporary character, but fan demand allowed Tommy to come back in Power Rangers. The actor Jason David Frank was going to be in another show after he left Power Rangers the first time. He was going to be in a show called Cybertron, which turns out to be VR Troopers. And but like I said, fan demand wanted the Tommy character return. So Jason David Frank went back to the set of Power Rangers, and he stuck there for the next couple of years. But Tommy was a very influential character. Just a very, very outstanding martial artist. But I mean, he had a little mysterious vibe, and sometimes his sometimes he would overshadow certain Rangers. But Tommy, I mean, I can't deny that he was still a very influential Ranger. I really enjoyed him as a kid. I really liked him as the Green Ranger. I'm not sure about him as a White Ranger. I mean, he got a little cocky, but I might get more into the White Ranger when we get to season 2. So I mean, Tommy, he had his demons. He's just kind of like the lone wolf of the group. He wasn't really utilized much in season 1, but I think going into season 2, or at least later into season 1, he started getting more screen time. So I mean, there were always times like his first tenure as Green Ranger where that he was only used when the Rangers needed him. So I mean, he wasn't really used a lot. I think that kind of applies with his Sentai counterpart, where he wasn't always used a lot either. So, but Tommy, he was just very useful Power Ranger. Always helping the Power Rangers out in desperate situations. So yeah, I mean, just a very iconic Power Rangers. I may have mixed feelings for him, but at the end of the day, I can't deny that he really made Power Rangers what it is. But to not take away the others, the other actors, other Power Ranger characters, but I mean, they were all played a big part into what made Power Rangers this overnight success. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say about Power Rangers season 1. So I think this video has pretty much kind of gone long for what it is. I'm going to cut this off. This is going to be it for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 1. Just leave your thoughts, your comments down below. What did you like? What did you not like about the season? But yeah, I mean, my voice is starting to get really dry. So this is basically Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 1. Probably going to follow it up with Season 2 for another time. So till next time, this is Gold Standard 00924 signing out.